This is a passage about what it's like to stand in absolute, complete despair. The prophet Ezekiel is staring at a valley not just of death, but one where any hint of life has long since disappeared. The people of Israel, exiled in Babylon, have lost their land, their temple, and their hope. They say, our bones are dried up, our hope is lost, we are completely cut off. Now, I could preach about hope restored when these bones start rattling, when flesh appears, and when wind blows. This would be a resurrection sermon snuck in just a few weeks before Easter. And it would be perfect to preach it here in this chapel, in this church, standing in front of this beautiful columbarium. But that is a sermon for a different day. The sermon I want to offer is about that gap between verse 6 and 7, between God telling Ezekiel what will happen and Ezekiel opening his mouth to prophesy. But to preach that sermon about that gap, I think requires a change of location. And the beautiful thing about preaching online and about being a seminary beyond walls is that we are not stuck in one place. So, come with me. So, I was born in Mobile, Alabama. And Mobile is an old city. It's a city that's older than the state of Alabama. It's older than the country. For about 12 years, I have lived in Birmingham, Alabama, which is sort of the opposite of Mobile in that it is not an old city. Birmingham did not become a city until after the Civil War, and it became a city here and a center of industry and commerce because in the foothills of the Appalachian Mountains around the city of Birmingham is everything that you need to make iron and steel. And so it became a steel town and was called the Magic City because it sprung up overnight. And so Birmingham was built with convict labor and was built on the backs of working poor white and black people. And by the mid-20th century, Birmingham was moving from a blue-collar town to a white-collar town. It had a thriving white middle class, a growing black middle class, and it was considered one of the most segregated cities in America. In 1963, Martin Luther King Jr. comes to Birmingham to work with local leaders to integrate the city. The Birmingham campaign would last from Holy Week in early April through to early May in 1963. During that time, King himself would be arrested and held in the Birmingham jail, penning his famous letter. The Birmingham campaign would end with the Children's Crusade. On May 2nd, hundreds of students walked out of their classes heading to downtown. 600 were arrested on that first day, filling the jails. On May 3rd, after the many arrests the day before, students poured out of the 16th Street Baptist Church down the steps into Kelley Ingram Park and were met here by Bull Connor and his dogs and fire hoses. By May 7th, the Birmingham jail and the temporary jails that Bull Connor created were so overflowing with young protesters that a resolution was eventually reached to integrate the city. King said the eyes of the world were on Birmingham, Alabama. Later that summer, King would lead the March on Washington, and then just 3 weeks later, Birmingham would be back in the news. On September 15, 1963, a bomb ripped through the basement of 16th Street Baptist Church, killing 4 young girls. King returned to Birmingham to preach at a funeral for 3 of those girls, and I think he must have felt a bit like the prophet Ezekiel, stuck between those verses. King had had this beautiful vision of what God would do, a dream for a new America, but now all of that seemed to disappear while he was facing unimaginable tragedy. He was caught in the despair between reality and prophecy. At the funeral for those girls King preached, they have something to say to every minister of the gospel who has remained silent behind safe security of stained glass windows. They say to each of us that we must substitute courage for caution. King continued that in spite of the darkness of this hour, we must not despair. We must not become bitter, nor must we harbor the desire to retaliate with violence, nor must we lose faith. For a lot of us, we may seem like we are in a moment of despair. The hard-fought victories of civil rights, integration, voting, marriage, trans rights, women's rights, healthcare are under attack. In many ways, it feels like we're losing, that we are slipping down into the mire of fear and greed and hatred. Our hope is drained away by racism, homophobia, sexism, transphobia, and Christian nationalism. Our communities are strained by economic instability, and we stand on the verge of war. And yet, we are like Ezekiel, we are like King, we are called to prophesy a dream of a new America, of a new world, to fill the gap of despair, to fill in the space between tragedy and hope, to speak a word that joins rattling bones together and calls the winds to bring breath. What I love about these readings that we get at the Easter Vigil is that we emerge from the grief of Good Friday and Holy Saturday to hear all the ways that God has already acted to give us healing and life. So as we face this moment in our country, we can look to our own history to hear how prophets, young and old, met death and fear with courage and conviction. And our work today, whether as students or professors, preachers and priests, as ministers of the gospel, is not optional. God commands us, so we will prophesy. In the face of death, God says that life is not optional. Thus says the Lord to these bones, I will cause breath to enter you, and you shall live, and you shall know that I am the Lord.